Previously in X-Men. It's 1989, and Wolverine has become a top-selling character at Marvel, being featured in 5 monthly comic books. It has become clear that artists can push the boundaries and interpret the character in many ways, some toward the abstract and expressionistic, and others will transform Wolverine into an icon.
I am Jason Lapidus. This is Chris Sanigan, and we are Group of 7 Comics. Welcome to episode 185 of our ongoing read-through of the X-Men comics that became classic. As I go through Havok and Wolverine, Meltdown by Walter Simonson, Louise Simonson, John J. Muth, and Kent Williams in 1988, and The Punisher War Journal, guest starring Wolverine by Carl Potts and Jim Lee from 1989. Of course, you can support the channel by clicking like, subscribe, and share if possible, as well as heading to group7comics.ca, where you can pick up both print and digital copies of Group of 7: A Most Secret Tale and Peregrine's Flights, Fiends, and Fisticuffs by writer Chris Sanigan and artist Jason Lapidus, yours truly. Thank you very much for your support. So a little context here. By the late 1980s, we've got a multitude of spin-off titles due to the success of the Uncanny X-Men, in large part by the work of Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Dave Cockrum, Paul Smith, John Romita Jr., Mark Silvestri, etc., etc. We also had a very successful Wolverine limited series by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. So it's no surprise that we're starting to see it trickle down into every facet of into as many facets as possible in Marvel Comics at the time. Editor Bob Harris was known to be a proponent of working with strategies that were financially successful. So if something sold well, let's do it again, and then let's do it again, and then let's do it twice as much. So by this point, Jim Shooter is now out of the picture, but we've got not only Uncanny X-Men, we have the New Mutants, which has been running strong for many years. We've got X-Factor, limited series like The Exterminators. There's Excalibur is a few issues in by the time this comes out. So there are a whole bunch of series. Chris Claremont is not on all of them. Of course, Louise Simonson and Walter Simonson were working on writing Excalibur. No, excuse me. We're working on writing X-Factor. Claremont himself, of course, was writing X-Factor as well. Louise Simonson was writing New Mutants. There was a whole little cadre of, there was a good group of people that were responsible for the X-Men creative side, and Wolverine starting to appear all over the place. He was in Captain America Annual 8. He did a Spider-Man Wolverine one-shot. He was becoming, at this point, he was a marquee player. Add into this, we've got, on the Punisher War Journal side, we now have Punisher in his second ongoing title, right? There was the Punisher Limited Series with art by Mike Zeck, which is, so cool. And then we get an ongoing Punisher series. I forget who the writer was. Art by Klaus Janson early on. And now the second Punisher series. I can't speak to everyone's experience at the time. I was definitely on board with more Punisher. I was a big G.I. Joe reader, and the idea of there being sort of a hybrid between a G.I. Joe guy, a mean G.I. Joe guy, and a Batman type vigilante, cleaning up the streets of New York City with really cool tech and lots of like pseudo military chatter. I was totally into that. It felt like, maybe a B movie of the time period. As well, I was a huge fan of Wolverine since for a few years by that point. So we need to see this stuff come out. Let's start by taking a look at Wolverine. Let's start by taking a look at Havok and Wolverine. I have all 4 issues here, but it's a lot. It's pretty dense stuff, and you'll see why in a minute. But we'll start with taking a look at this. Right away, we notice painted covers, pretty interesting. It's it's unclear how the writing duties are going to break down between Walter Simonson and Louise Simonson. Let's just assume they were working pretty organically, given that they they were married. John J. Muth and Kent Williams, strangely, are breaking up the cover duties. That's not that strange. John J. Muth and Kent Williams are strangely breaking up the duties of who paints which character. So Muth is painting Havoc, and Kent Williams is painting Wolverine for the most part. Elektra Assassin coming out a couple years earlier. This is a representation. This is a reprint. Again, painterly with that hypergloss white paper, almost manufactured gutters there. But amazing, amazing art from a technical point of view, and very unusual for comics. So coming off that success in 86, 87, it's no surprise that Marvel is willing to try something in that vein. So going with Meltdown, they're going for some painted art, and you get some gorgeous stuff. The opening scene takes place at Chernobyl, the site of a nuclear disaster in Russia, or in the Soviet Union. And it's a little bit dense. You know, as a 13-year-old, this was not something I wanted to stop and read. But it's that prologue that sets up a lot of the story. So we know there is an international espionage and a little background on what was going on, a little something behind the scenes in the Russian nuclear, I should say, in the Soviet nuclear program. We've got obviously different voices from the different colored narration boxes. Just really unfun to read as a kid. And we get an explosion, which just now looks like poured paint. But it reads as an explosion just fine. Really beautiful art. And then we get the thing we all came for, Havok and Wolverine, and this guy. We don't get the shot we're looking for, which is, well, I'll just say what's here. Wolverine is fighting off a bunch of guys in a bar. There's a manufactured reason they're having this scrap. Someone offended somebody else. And I think there's an ongoing bet between Wolverine and Havoc as to who is going to be able to resist using their powers the longest. There's a little fun joke on like Dos Equis, the beer, and it just says X-Men. Kind of fun. Anyway, Wolverine's fighting off guys while Havoc is sitting at the bar. Havoc in this issue is being played by James Dean, and here is Wolverine as he's winning the fight, red-nosed. I do not know which actor Kent Williams is using as his model, but I think this leaves a little doubt. I mean, for those of you who might be too young to have seen a lot of the iconic images of James Dean, it looks like Brad Pitt maybe to your eye. And that's totally understandable. Sometimes the motion is really beautiful. It's a pretty dark book. There you go. James Dean. Very abstract version of Logan. Giant hands, really bulky forearms. I think the idea was to have his claws, encased in those forearms. And really interesting take on his hair as being these almost tendrils at the back of his head. Clearly more rendering is put into these two characters than into this poor guy. He looks like he's almost just holding line on a little bit of spatter and a little bit of shading. Not a lot of attention in this series is put in on backgrounds. Anyway, the guys, then they leave. This is, I guess, the village that they're in. And they go down the street. They're talking about what they're going to do, how that might raise a problem. Wolverine pops his claws, not part of the bet. Gets his cigar ready. The guys are heading up to their room for the night. And when they get up in the morning or hours later, the guys from the bar have returned and there is a fight. And the two run away. This is one of the rare John J. Muth versions of Wolverine, so you can see his hair is not as long. It's a more restrained interpretation. And as they're running, they steal this woman's car, who clearly is set up to be some kind of femme fatale type figure. Anyway, they get in this car, and they drive off, and they take her with them. Because this is totally normal. And as they're driving away, she's doing her makeup. Is she Sean Young? I'm not sure. I don't know. A mysterious figure appears from the other vehicle. There's lots of Star Wars references. They call him Darth Vader. They're getting chased. At least these, cars are off the road, up in the air. It gives them the illusion of some speed, movement. There he goes. I think it's Darth Vader. And he shoots lasers at them. And so she says, "Lasers? Who are you guys? Luke Skywalker and Han Solo?" Hey, back then, it had been already, 5 years since the last Star Wars movie. And it felt like a good reference to pull. Now it feels lazy. But at least there's an exciting 2-page spread here. And then you get this weird, that they're a whole bunch of guys like this waiting for them. Kind of a post-apocalyptic. I don't know who these guys are. It's really unclear. The sky is awesome. The characters look a little underdeveloped. Anyway, they go on a bridge. She stands up in a car while it's moving. And James Dean's there. And James Dean, Havoc uses his powers finally, and he says, you win. Drinks are on me. And he blows away the flying car that is chasing them. Turns out, she's a problem all along. And she shoots them both multiple times, in Wolverine's case, with a silencer. And when Wolverine wakes up, this is neat, kind of coming out of his unconsciousness. They say that he has bubonic plague, or he had bubonic plague, and his friend has died. And it's impossible that, that Wolverine even survived that long. Wolverine finds one of the bullets in his body, passes out again. Then when he wakes up, he goes wandering. This is one of the downsides of this issue. It's not always an easy read. Like, it's pretty dense at times, but if you go here and here, I guess you go here next, and then the next thing you read is not these. It's over and then here, and then up here, down here. Like, this page is a reading mess. You should go from here to whatever's kind of next, whatever the closest thing is. But it was laid out weird. To prove my point that this is laid out weird, these 4 panels on the bottom, this is one painting. And by that, I don't mean this row is painted all together and separately. I mean that it is one painting that has been chopped up and repurposed for this bottom, because the page has layout issues. So you can imagine, before this was put in, which is just there serves no purpose except for to put something at the bottom. This was the page. That's what they had. So they were rearranging work to make it fit on this page for some reason. So here's that image, okay? Wolverine, sunglasses. That's the exact same mouth. That's the arm that would be on his side. That's the hand at the bottom of that arm. It's right there. So this is a great painting, and this has been chopped up and used in the previous page. So Wolverine has gone to Havoc's grave to mourn/confirm, and he smells the tombstone. He's suspicious, starts to growl. I want to grow my sideburns like that. He tears the tombstone out of the ground, pops his claws, and starts digging. So we get now, let's just say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-8 pages to end this issue of Wolverine digging up Havoc's grave to find a dummy stuffed with rocks. He says a man-sized pinata. It ain't Alex. Ain't even a family resemblance, which means he's alive. By the way, this is not proof that Alex is alive. It just means he's not there. Not good deducing, bro. Or bub, I should say. Anyway, that's the end of that issue. So in this issue, what's happened is they are tangled up in some sort of mystery. And the Soviet nuclear program is somehow part of this. Interesting to look at, not a fun read. Issue 2. Feels like the other artist now. It's Kent Williams on the cover as opposed to John J. Muth. This Havoc doesn't feel like it's as James Deany or as James Dean-like. Same super exciting gray end pages. Archie Goodwin, editor-in-chief, right? It's because this is Epic Comics, not Marvel. So Epic is an imprint, a graphic novel imprint at Marvel for older readers. And we get another scene of Wolverine in action. He wants to know where he can find the people involved. A little torture, right? Poking through the hand. It's a good start. I feel like this is, right out of a spaghetti western, that locale. And Havoc wakes up. Remember, he got bubonic plague or something, and he's in a hospital. There he is, James Dean. And now the femme fatale is a different femme fatale, or maybe not, but it's a redhead. Still the same kind of like legs and stockings. Maybe that's striking lips. And they tell him that Wolverine is dead. Anyway, she's working behind the scenes with these guys, and they call her Quark. See, there's a little bit of Sean Young in that face too, like Blade Runner era. Hair a different color, of course. And then we get this guy. He feels like a Frank Miller character. He kind of got some Quasimodo hunched over proportions with a giant chin. He feels like he could be a character in Sin City or maybe, I don't know, Dark Knight 2. Interesting. This guy is called Meltdown. So we have a character called Quark. This character is called Neutron. And Neutron, I think, you can feel free to agree or disagree. I've forgotten his name, unfortunately. Grand Moff Tarkin, I think, from Star Wars. Reminds me of him. I mean, come on, James Dean. So he's getting nursed back to health, but brainwashed at the same time. Uses his powers. They're like, oh my gosh, what's that? How'd you do that? Neat effect to make the TV screen. So this, he's being watched on a monitor here, and that's maybe some pencil or charcoal on like a coquille board or something textured that's been cut and pasted in. Nice to look at. That's very cool as an effect. An old black and white TV, right? And it looks good. Very effective. The guys in the laboratory are watching. Reminds me of Weapon X, of course. Wolverine gets a helicopter. He's going to go looking, or at least follows the scent that far. Does some sleuthing, investigating, leaning on some people to get some information. Meanwhile, Quark is manipulating Havoc. giving him misinformation. It's a lot of talking. Wolverine's at night and he hears thumping at the door. He knows something's going on. And the next thing you know, his entire place blows up. And they say, Dos Vidania, Comrade Logan. So they've blown up Logan in his hidey hole wherever he was staying. Turns out he wasn't there. Look at this. Comes out of the trunk, fighting, kill some guys. I mean, this is pretty dramatic. New player enters, looking for Logan too. He hits Quark, pulls a gun. Havoc resists and fights him. They have their moment. Pretty awesome. I don't stand by that Sean Young thing. Just I don't know who to cast as this Quark character. Interesting use of paint to demonstrate Havoc's powers. Lots of airbrush being used in that one. So like you tape off sections and then spray with the airbrush and then do it again and again and again in different ways. Anyway, Wolverine is following his scent, trying to track down Havoc again. Something happens, another explosion. All of Wolverine's clothes are burned off, and you get Wolverine face down in the muck. And that is Wolverine's butt crack right there. He wakes up and he's naked. The picture everyone's always wanted. Don't look too close. He says right there, burned off my clothes and half my skin. Skin will heal, least of my problems. I think whatever's burnt there is the most of his problems. Who knows? One of the knocks on this book to me is the lettering doesn't really match the art. It's not integrated beautifully, not by the artists, but by kind of like a third party, which can yield great results sometimes, but to me this one, not really. Wolverine finds a way to an airfield. Alex is just taken off. And in a biplane, and there's another explosion. Like, I kind of don't care what happens next. Let's compare that, if you will, with whatever they had going on over in the Punisher War Journal, issues 6 and 7. So this is about a year later, maybe less than a year later. We have Jim Lee has entered the scene at Marvel. He's drawn a few issues of Alpha Flight, and now he is the regular artist on Punisher War Journal with issue 1. He is being given layouts by Carl Potts, who is a more experienced storyteller at this point. But it felt like this was already like a change in style for Marvel. This is no longer an ad page. You know, so us kids who were getting these off, I guess, the racks at the comic book store at the end of the 80s, it felt like I was into, like, that comics were aging. They were aging up. They weren't just for, me as a kid. They were for young adult me. They were printed on a little bit of a better paper, not as far as the Meltdown stuff, which is actually like perfect spine bound, graphic novel almost, but they're glued in, perfect bound. And these ones are still stapled, but they're on a bit of a better paper. The color is kind of showing up. It's not being absorbed by the newsprint. It's much more vibrant. This series, the story is essentially Oh, there are a few different parties that have a conflict of interest. Frank needs a break from killing people in New York City. There is a game hunter who wants to get the rumored head of a dinosaur from, I guess, the African Congo. And then there are other people involved. Wolverine from Madripoor, early days of his solo series and stuff in Marvel Comics Presents. He catches the scent of a guy who is wearing a jacket made of cheetah, and of course it's a rare cat. It's not legal, so Wolverine takes exception. Seeing these lines, like the kinds of lines Jim Lee is throwing down in 1989, it just it wasn't something that we would see in other work in Marvel at the time. We're seeing that brush that's being slung by Dan Green over in X-Men. All of a sudden, we're seeing, Al Williamson or Klaus Janson over John Buscema in Wolverine's solo stuff. And then we're getting these tight, tight, tight lines from Jim Lee here. I think he's inking his own work. Yeah, he's doing all the finished art. So this is before his days with Scott Williams. Like every little hair on the back of his palm, the back of his hand, I should say, the city in the background. It's just like I'm 13 or 14 almost, and I'm like, that's Wolverine. This is what I want to see. Wolverine is knife fighting with a guy. The guy pulls a knife. Wolverine pulls three. Nice blade, bub. But I brought my own. And so we're getting, a bit of a more grown-up version of Wolverine. Not superhero Wolverine, but investigator, shadows, anti-hero Wolverine. But maybe this is like the best version, the best Wolverine that we had seen drawn up to this point in comics. So yeah, he's getting his tip to go. His tip to leave town and go take a break from his friend Microchip. There's also there's a deli that Punisher visits in these issues, and there's a family that lives there. And I don't exactly remember. I want to call them the Shadow Masters. I think they're ninja, but it was just sort of fun having, again, I was a G.I. Joe reader, so like the Storm Shadow, the Arashikage clan was a big part of the lore around the G.I. Joe comics, and it felt like this was an extension of that. I don't really remember now, but maybe the father and his two kids, and they have some interesting connections. They are able to do things that normal neighbors don't do. Anyway, not Wolverine. Punisher goes undercover as security on an expedition to Africa, and it's going to go bad. Okay, it's going to go bad. Anyway, long story short, incredible drawing, and eventually forces clash. They get a sense that the locals are going to take this expedition to find dinosaurs. I mean, no one was drawing like this in Marvel at the time. Insane. The sophistication in his figure work. He was taking John Byrne and George Perez and bringing it to an entire new level. Yeah, they're killing off the gorilla. It's some pretty awful stuff. Neat here, throwing down leaves, like the shadow of those leaves and things on the characters' backs. Here too, maybe a little overused here, but really neat. Never had I seen guns look this good other than Michael Golden. And then Wolverine shows up. For some reason, he's wearing no shirt, but the skin of, I guess, that jacket, that cheetah skin. I guess it makes him look more interesting and also leads to the confusion because he'll come across like a poacher, which will help lead to the main conflict. So it ends up that Punisher starts fighting this gorilla, the Silverback, in self-defense, and Wolverine sees it and comes upon him and says, "You'll pay for this." And so they have their misunderstanding. They fight. Punisher lands a good punch to his face. Bruises his hands up pretty good. But again, never had Wolverine ever looked so cool and visceral. "I'll get you all. You'll get squat." And anyway, they punch it out. And that issue ends. I mean, look at the body hair on this guy. My goodness, the drawing it takes to be able to do that. The issue ends with Frank Castle falling into the nearby river. Wolverine, who almost has the same face as Punisher, essentially. Jim Lee is drawing these sort of heightened masculine versions of these characters. Punisher seemingly drowns, and a predator is coming in the river. Very cool. You want to learn about your weapons, you get your pages like this at the end of each issue. Your Punisher War Journal equipment page. And the letters pages are always interesting. Lots of technical military weapons expertise in those letters. Punisher wakes up while he's being eaten by this reptilian predator. And interesting color choices by Gregory Wright. It's a little bit unreadable, kind of, but it's really dynamic in terms of the line art and the action. I mean, again, you weren't seeing this stuff. You were seeing some of these kinds of poses out of Frank Miller, but the detailed rendering we weren't seeing out of anybody. His figures weren't cartoony, and that's not a knock at cartoony figures. It just felt like, again, you were seeing really, really well proportioned. Like his anatomy seemed really sound. Characters were incredibly sturdy and were like Greco-Roman statues, of like these perfect specimens. The muscles were crazy, like a real heightened version. I'm trying to think of anyone else who was drawing a little bit like this. He's pulling from, like I said, Miller sometimes in terms of poses, but like taking what John Byrne and George Perez did with maybe some Mike Zeck from the covers or his Punisher series, and just heightening it all. There's this interlude with Punisher's neighbor. Eventually, it's going to come to pass that Punisher and who's now decorated his own outfit with a skull, they're going to come across each other again, Punisher and Wolverine. Hasn't really found his style that we see later in the 90s around faces. I like this stuff. I think they look really good. Clearly a referenced image from someone else's work on dinosaurs, like that texture on the skin. Amazing. Right? Like this not doesn't this remind you of Frank Miller? This kind of page? Or those images? And Punisher and Wolverine find each other for round 2. Wolverine takes one in the thigh. Double zap your zits. And maybe that's the best page in the whole thing. Crazy back muscles. Punisher lands a few good ones, right? As Wolverine got round 1, maybe Punisher gets round 2. The Arsenal. Ooh, my goodness. And they decide, in this moment, not to fight each other. Chumps. We're both chumps. They realize the real enemy are the other people, and they want to kill the dinosaurs. Either way, the dinosaurs run away into the bush. Everyone who needs to get shot gets shot. They face justice in the grim Punisher version of justice. And Wolverine's going after the poachers. The Punisher lets him go. And Wolverine decides to take that cheetah skin and tie this guy up. Punisher even comes across him, doesn't change it, just they leave him tied up in the woods to let nature take its course. Punisher returns to New York, gets a notice from his neighbors, basically saying that that was handled, that the person who wanted the head of that dinosaur is no longer a concern. And we see the skeleton in the jungle, still wrapped, the skin of that cheetah, but with no flesh on the bone, being stomped and walked over by a long-necked dinosaur. Paleontological note, it is now understood that these kinds of dinosaurs did not drag their tail, but it's a counterbalance and a whip. Counterbalance with the head and the weight of the body. Anyway, just saying. Very different experience reading this in contrast to Meltdown. I think I will still read Meltdown 3 and 4, but probably not on screen. They are very, very dense and not that pleasurable, at least not for me at this moment. Just to get some more context out there, there was another magazine that Marvel was publishing at the time called Marvel Age, and it was kind of like their own in-house trade magazine where they would tell you what's coming out. And just this idea of getting this Jim Lee art. We know he's on Punisher War Journal, but getting Wolverine in costume around this time, saying, hey, like, we know you guys want to see Wolverine. He made an appearance in Alpha Flight, but you can see that you get this new budding superstar artist on good books, getting to draw marquee characters. Namor is fine, but that Wolverine is dope, and Punisher is fantastic. In the next issue, you get Havoc and Wolverine in a strange, regular comic book kind of format to promote their upcoming series of Meltdown. And this is weird. It looks like it doesn't fit in this style, right? Maybe it actually would work great. I would kind of want to read this book, maybe with a bit of a tighter script. That might be, hey there, Elvira. Maybe that might be one of the keys to success in attracting a reader like me is, unconventional line art, but still in that Marvel Comics house style as opposed to the epic comics, wide open graphic novel style. Like so. This is beautiful, though. What's your reaction to Havoc and Wolverine Meltdown? Would you like me to go through the final 2 issues? Let me know in the comments section below.
Cable, 1 part Punisher, 1 part Terminator. Very strange to have an X-Men who is gun wielding, coming from being a 70s and 80s X-Men fan. X-Men don't carry guns; it's just not part of the brand. But at the same time, they did come across characters like Kazar or Archon, or other Marvel superheroes that inhabit different areas of the Marvel universe. So I like the idea that they do come across this futuristic cyborg, coming across a character that inhabits a different landscape, a different territory in the Marvel universe is interesting as a supporting character. Sure, he gets introduced and becomes the leader of the New Mutants and all that stuff, but that's not really part of what's happening on X-Men 97 so far, or in the Marvel comics that I gravitate toward. Cool figure. The design is fantastic. It's right on brand for the show, while the articulation and posability is limited by the design choices. And I'm totally cool with that. Good looking figure.
And that brings us to the end of another episode. I'm looking forward to next week when we can get back to hanging out with my good buddy Chris Hannigan, the writer of Group of Seven, A Most Secret Tale, and Peregrine's Flights, Fiends, and Fisticuffs. Of course, you can find out more about our comics and upcoming appearances at group of7comics.ca and follow us at Group of Seven Comics on social media. Please click like and subscribe and share with us your take on these issues or any X-Men comics in the comments section below. Go dig out your old back issues, trade paperbacks, essentials, omnibuses, DVD-ROMs, bootlegs, or hop on an app and read along with us next week on Previously in X-Men. Thank you, bubs, and stay Xy.